Deep down, you don't just suffer, you schedule it. Congratulations, you're your own emotional personal trainer. 1. The control illusion. You think you hate chaos, but secretly, suffering gives you a sense of control. When everything's falling apart, at least you get to decide how miserable you'll be. It's your pain, your rules. Psychologists call this the control illusion, the twisted comfort of mastering your own downfall. That's why some people stay in toxic relationships or miserable jobs. Misery becomes a familiar neighborhood where you know every streetlight. Happiness? That's uncharted territory. Your brain would rather stick with the suffering it understands than risk a joy it can't predict. Ironically, by clinging to pain for safety, you end up imprisoned by the only thing you can manage, your own discomfort. 2. The martyr complex. You're not addicted to suffering. You're addicted to being seen suffering. Somewhere deep down, you've learned that pain equals worth. The harder your life, the more real you feel. That's the martyr complex, the quiet ego trip of self-sacrifice. You give too much, take too little, and then secretly resent everyone for not noticing. It's emotional theater disguised as virtue. The tragic part? Most martyrs don't want help. They want an audience. Because the second you stop suffering, you lose your identity as the strong one. And let's be honest, peace just doesn't get the same applause. 3. The familiar pain loop. Here's the cruel joke. Your brain confuses familiarity with safety. If you grew up surrounded by conflict, silence feels terrifying. If you were ignored, attention feels suspicious. So you keep walking back into the same emotional fire, calling it fate. Neuroscience shows that your brain releases dopamine, the feel-good chemical, even during emotional pain, as long as it's predictable. That's why you keep texting the person who hurt you, why you chase rejection, why closure never closes anything. You're not self-destructive. You're just loyal to the pain that feels like home. 4. The masochistic achievement bias. You think suffering proves effort. If it didn't hurt, it doesn't count. That's why you brag about your burnout like it's a trophy. Somewhere along the way, your brain confused exhaustion with excellence. Psychologists call this effort justification, the belief that pain gives meaning to our choices. You'll stay in toxic jobs, relationships, or mindsets just to prove that your suffering wasn't for nothing. It's not progress, it's emotional Stockholm syndrome. You don't chase success, you chase struggle because comfort feels like you're cheating. You're not lazy, you're just addicted to earning your right to exist the hard way. 5. The emotional hoarding effect. You say you've moved on, but your subconscious is basically an emotional landfill. You keep old pain like souvenirs, replaying betrayals, collecting regrets, reliving conversations that ended years ago. Why? Because your brain treats unresolved emotions as open tabs. Closing them feels like losing a part of yourself. Psychologists call this the Zeigarnik effect. Unfinished emotions demand attention, so you keep the pain close, just in case you need it later to explain who you are. But here's the punchline. The more pain you store, the less room you have for anything new. You're not healing. You're curating your misery like it's a museum exhibit. 6. The guilt programming glitch. Somewhere, someone taught you that happiness is selfish. Maybe it was family, religion, or society whispering that good people sacrifice. Now, when you finally start to feel peace, guilt kicks in like a built-in alarm. You don't relax, you brace for punishment. This is learned guilt conditioning. Your brain pairs joy with danger, so you sabotage yourself just to feel morally clean. You'll pick fights when things go well, reject love when it feels safe, and ruin victories because they feel unearned. You call it humility. It's actually self-harm with better branding. 7. The emotional narcotic theory. Pain is the only drug your brain doesn't need a prescription for. When you suffer, your body releases endorphins, the same chemicals that dull physical pain. Over time, your brain learns that misery equals relief. That's why you find calm in chaos and tension in peace. It's a neurochemical addiction, your emotions chasing their next hit. You think you're processing trauma, but really, you're getting high on your own suffering. It's not spiritual depth. It's biology playing dress-up. 8. The validation vacuum. You don't just feel pain, you perform it. Because deep down, suffering gets attention, and attention feels like love. When you say, "I'm fine," but secretly hope someone will ask again, that's not weakness. That's conditioning. You've learned that being okay makes you invisible. Psychologists call this the interpersonal reinforcement loop. You unconsciously repeat behaviors that once earned care, even if they hurt you now. It's emotional clickbait. Tragedy gets more engagement than peace ever will. You're not chasing empathy. You're chasing proof that someone's watching your pain like it matters. 9. The self-sabotage safety net. Ever notice how right before things go really well, you manage to ruin everything? That's your brain trying to protect you from disappointment. Psychologists call it defensive pessimism, sabotaging success before it can reject you first. You'll send that reckless text, skip that opportunity, or ghost the one person who actually cared, all in the name of control. Because failure hurts less when you cause it yourself. You call it bad luck, but it's actually preemptive heartbreak insurance. Congratulations, you've turned fear into foresight and called it a strategy. 10. The trauma familiarity. Bias. Your heart has a terrible sense of direction. It keeps mistaking familiar for safe. That's why you date the same type of person in different bodies and call it your type. It's not a type, it's a trauma playlist on repeat. The people who feel like home usually resemble the chaos you survived, not the peace you deserve. Neuroscience calls this trauma repetition compulsion. Your brain tries to rewrite the ending of old pain by reliving it. But the brain doesn't know it's recycling. It just knows it feels right. You're not cursed in love. You're just trying to finish a story that should have ended chapters ago. 11. The heroic suffering syndrome. You call it pushing through. Psychologists call it self-destructive resilience. It's the belief that enduring pain makes you noble, that bleeding quietly is somehow brave. You brag about handling everything on your own, but what you're really doing is rehearsing your own breakdown. Because if you stop suffering, what's left to prove? You've built your identity around surviving instead of living. You don't rest, you recover just enough to keep breaking again. The irony? You're desperate to be admired for strength, but all people see is someone drowning beautifully. 12. The comfort in chaos effect. Ever feel weirdly calm when everything's falling apart? That's because chaos is your emotional comfort zone. When life finally slows down, you get anxious, like peace is suspicious. This is homeostatic trauma conditioning. Your brain's internal thermostat is set to crisis. So when things get too quiet, it invents drama just to restore balance. That's why you pick fights when things go well, or overthink silence like it's a threat. Peace doesn't feel safe, it feels wrong. And until you reset that baseline, you'll keep mistaking calm for danger and chaos for normal. 13. The invisible punishment loop. You think you're just hard on yourself, but what you're really doing is self-punishment for existing. Every mistake becomes evidence that you deserve less love, less rest, less joy. This is internalized shame conditioning. Somewhere, someone convinced you that suffering equals goodness. So now you atone for invisible crimes, like being imperfect, emotional, or simply alive. You'll deny yourself happiness to feel morally pure. But here's the dark twist. Self-hate feels righteous. You get addicted to the moral high ground of pain. You're not being humble. You're sentencing yourself daily for crimes you never committed. 14. The nostalgia trap. You don't miss the past. You miss who you were allowed to be in it. Pain tricks you into romanticizing old suffering because it's familiar, predictable, and safely finished. Psychologists call this rosy retrospection, the tendency to remember bad times as simpler. You scroll through old messages, not because you want them back, but because you want to feel that version of yourself again, the one who still believed it could end differently. Nostalgia is grief wearing perfume. It makes your past pain look poetic, so your present one feels less pathetic. 15. The hope addiction. You think you're a hopeless romantic, but you're actually a hope junkie. You get high on potential. The maybe, the what if, the they'll change. Hope becomes your favorite drug because it's the only thing that numbs despair without curing it. You stay in dead situations not because they're good, but because you can still imagine they could be. Psychologists call this intermittent reinforcement, the same system that keeps gamblers chasing losses. Your brain gets hooked on unpredictability, confusing chaos with possibility. You don't need closure, you need detox from the fantasy of someday. 16. The emotional echo effect. You're not sad because of what happened. You're sad because your brain keeps replaying it like a greatest hits album of pain. Every thought reopens the same wound, and your neurons celebrate the reunion. Neuroscientists call this emotional memory consolidation. Every time you recall pain, you strengthen its wiring. That's why it feels fresh years later. Your brain's basically re-uploading misery in HD. The cruel irony? The more you try to understand your suffering, the deeper you carve it into your mind. Sometimes healing isn't about analyzing, it's about starving the echo until it fades. 17. The empathy overdose. You think being deeply empathetic makes you kind. It actually makes you emotionally flammable. When you absorb everyone else's pain, your brain floods with stress hormones as if you lived their trauma. Psychologists call this empathic distress fatigue. You're not helping others, you're slowly burning yourself alive under the illusion of compassion. That's why you end up exhausted, resentful, and secretly wishing everyone would just figure it out. You don't lack empathy, you've overdosed on it. Sometimes love isn't about feeling with people, it's about knowing when to stop. 18. The if I just fix it delusion. Your brain loves puzzles, especially emotional ones. You see broken people and think, I can fix them. That's not love, it's trauma control theater. Psychologists call it compulsive caregiving, the drive to heal others as a way to avoid your own wounds. Every toxic relationship becomes a DIY therapy project where you play both doctor and patient, and every failure reinforces your suffering, proving you tried. You're not healing anyone, you're auditioning for redemption. The real fix starts when you admit you were never supposed to be the repair crew for other people's chaos. 19. The self-comparison spiral. You don't even need enemies. Your brain is your own PR nightmare. You scroll, compare, and instantly conclude that everyone else is happier, prettier, and definitely less mentally unhinged. Psychologists call this social comparison bias. It's evolution's way of keeping you competitive, except now, instead of hunting food, you're hunting validation. Every scroll reinforces inadequacy. Your dopamine hits come with a side of despair. The result? You measure your worth not by progress, but by proximity to someone else's filtered fantasy. You're not failing, you're benchmarking your life against illusions. 20. The phantom purpose problem. Here's the cruelest twist of all. Sometimes you suffer because you need to believe it means something. You turn your pain into prophecy, that someday it'll all make sense. Psychologists call this the meaning-making instinct. It's how your brain prevents existential collapse. But when you can't find a reason, you start inventing one, turning random misfortune into destiny. You tell yourself, it happened for a reason, because it happened for nothing is unbearable. The truth? Sometimes pain has no moral, it's just static in the system, and accepting that might be the closest thing to freedom you'll ever feel. 21. The happiness rejection reflex. Ever notice how you ruin good days for no reason? That's your brain rejecting happiness like a bad organ transplant. Psychologists call this hedonic defense. When you've spent too long in pain, joy feels foreign, unsafe, even suspicious. So you nitpick it, test it, and eventually destroy it before it can leave on its own. You'll pick fights during peaceful moments, question kindness, or convince yourself it's too good to be true. It's not your intuition, it's your trauma acting like a border patrol for joy. You don't sabotage happiness because you hate it. You sabotage it because it doesn't match your internal weather forecast. Permanent storm. 22. The savior's exhaustion. You love being the one people rely on, until you don't. You swoop in, fix everything, and then wonder why you're drained, resentful, and invisible. Welcome to pathological altruism, a psychological pattern where helping others becomes your way to feel worthy. You don't rescue people out of love. You do it to prove you deserve love. Every crisis gives you purpose. Every broken person gives you a mission. The tragedy? The moment they heal or leave, you feel empty. Because without someone to save, you'd have to face the one person you can't fix, yourself. 23. The reality distortion of maybe. Your brain can survive heartbreak, rejection, even loss, but it can't handle uncertainty. That's why maybe hurts more than no. Psychologists call this ambiguous loss. It's when your brain grieves something that isn't fully gone, a person who ghosts, a dream half dead, a feeling that used to exist. The loop never closes. You keep refreshing the message thread, stalking the past, waiting for clarity. That never comes. Hope becomes purgatory. And here's the sad punchline. Your brain would rather live in constant confusion than face finality. Because closure ends the story, but uncertainty keeps you starring in it. 24. The chaos reward system. You say you want peace, but peace bores you. Chaos, on the other hand, makes you feel alive. Every argument, every crisis, every emotional cliff dive pumps adrenaline into your nervous system like an energy drink for the soul. Psychologists call this arousal addiction, when your brain gets hooked on stress chemicals because calm feels like withdrawal. That's why you chase drama, not because you enjoy it, but because silence feels like death. You mistake inner stillness for emptiness, so you keep setting emotional fires just to feel the warmth. You're not broken, you're just running on the wrong fuel. 25. The self-pity feedback loop. You think you're just venting. You're actually reinforcing misery with every retelling. Neuroscience calls this rumination reinforcement. Every time you describe your suffering, your brain fires the same emotional circuits as when it first happened. You're not getting it off your chest, you're re-traumatizing yourself for free. That's why complaining feels cathartic for 5 minutes, and then worse. Your pain wants silence, but your ego wants applause. You don't seek understanding, you seek validation that your suffering means something. But the universe isn't grading you for endurance. It's waiting for you to stop narrating your own tragedy. 26. The comfort of misery. Paradox. Final fact. Here's the ultimate glitch. Suffering is predictable, and your brain worships predictability. It's the devil you know. Pain has routine, structure, rhythm. Joy demands surrender, risk, uncertainty. So you keep choosing the heartbreak you can schedule over the happiness you can't control. Because at least misery shows up on time. Psychologists call this emotional homeostasis. Your brain would rather suffer consistently than heal unpredictably. You've built a nest in your own discomfort, decorated it, called it me. But here's the real twist. The moment you stop romanticizing pain, it stops feeling like purpose and starts looking like what it always was. Wasted potential disguised as depth. So, yeah, you don't just enjoy suffering. You curate it, justify it, and call it character development. Which of these psychological bugs is running your life the hardest? Tell me below. And be honest, your misery deserves closure.